A full roster, built in minutes, using the clinical logic you already trust, just augmented by intelligence. I'm Iris. Let me show you how I support healthcare rostering without the headache. When I log in, this is the dashboard. Think of it as mission control. Everything you need in one place. Let me start where every roster starts, people. This is where your clinical staff live. Their craft group, a colour for visual clarity, consultant, registrars, HMOs, and their scope of practice. And yes, all of this ties back to organisation settings because this is where intelligence needs structure. This is also where my intelligent rules live, set specific to each organisation's, customisable by the organisation admins. Hard rules, I will not bend them. Soft rules if you force me in my tactical mode. Safety first, flexibility second. We'll come back to those shortly. Now let's look at how the service actually runs. Here's the stream view, cascaded exactly how a standard department would run, and you design this. Red, green, fast track, short stay, and nights. This mirrors how most emergency departments actually work, not how software wishes they worked. Within each stream, you define shift patterns. For example, on a red stream morning, 1 emergency physician, 2 senior registrars, 3 HMOs. You describe the demand. I remember it. No need to fix the same demand every day. Be custom as you like. Some departments also use a master roster for fixed or rotating duties. Others rely more on availability. Staff can tell me when they prefer to work. Say, 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening. And here's the clever bit. Once availability is entered, I show them which shifts that availability actually matches. Staff can enter availability that is useful to the department. No, I'll just tick everything and hope. Set the repeating pattern, same as any calendar apps that they already use too. They can tell us preference, availability, and unavailability. From the admin side, you can now see everyone's availability at a glance. The living roster. Level 5 shows the roster exactly as you designed it. Streams and shift patterns flowing straight from levels 1 and 2. The grid shows the empty cells with the demand already set. To turn on my AI features, you select a stream. Let's start with the red stream. First, you apply the master roster. Logical, predictable, safe. Then you ask me to build the roster. At this point, I go to work, applying availability, demand, scopes, safety rules, and fairness. You get a preview. You can see who is allocated, why, and how they qualified. If you're happy, you apply it. The red stream is done. That Wednesday, teaching morning. No senior registrars, 3 emergency physicians, handled. Now let's do the same for the other streams. This part usually takes, well, about as long as a sip of coffee. In the background, deterministic logic and AI optimization are working together, quietly, reliably. Now everything's built, every stream, beautifully color-coded, still in draft because humans stay in control. Let's check coverage. You can see a few gaps. Nothing unsafe, just places where my conservative mode couldn't find a fair option. So now you can ask me to shift gears. Tactical mode, fill the gaps. This is where I go a little more tactical. Fill the gaps. I stay respectful of qualifications and safety, but I become more assertive about coverage. I can slightly bend the soft AI rules. Let's do this tactical mode call fill gaps function to all the streams. Note this. Sometimes I get a bit enthusiastic. If I over-allocate, you can fix it with one click. On this red stream morning, I have allocated 4 HMOs instead of 3. Let's fix this. You can manually unassign one of them as I have just guided you. When you're done, coverage turns green across the board. Once everything looks right, you publish. Stream by stream. Staff can see their shifts, sync to Apple or Google Calendar, and get on with their work and their lives. And that's it. From staff upload to a complete emergency department roster. In under 5 minutes. Let's start properly. What you just saw was the end result. Now I'll take you through how we got there, step by step. This walkthrough is structured by levels, and you can use the timestamps at any point to jump forward, pause, or revisit a section, entirely at your own pace. Let's begin at the foundation. Here's what I'm actually doing behind the scenes. I start with the non-negotiables, the things that keep people safe and hospitals functioning. First I check, are you available? Are you on leave? Then I go deeper. Right craft group. Right scope of practice. No overlapping shifts. Enough rest between shifts. No accidental 14-hour marathons. No one working 7 days straight like it's some kind of survival challenge. That entire layer is logical. Techies call this deterministic. Only after the basics are locked in do I bring in intelligence, the AI stuffs. That's where I start balancing weekends, sharing out nights, respecting preferences where I can, spreading workload evenly. Looking at historical fairness, not just this week but over time. That's the optimization layer. So when you see a roster appear quickly, it's not magic. It's discipline first, intelligence second. Now, once that foundation is solid, then you can say, fill the gaps. That's when I change gears. I get more tactical. I optimize coverage. I balance teams. I solve problems intelligently, not desperately. What you're seeing here is a big picture view, intentionally broad. We'll zoom into each level properly in future walkthroughs. And if you want to jump ahead, rewind, or just skip the bits you already understand, use the timestamps. Let's dive in. I'm logging in as the organization admin, the role with full access to set things up properly. This is the dashboard. Think of it as the command center, where everything starts and everything connects. From here, we move from setup to structure, to building the roster itself. Let's begin. As the organization admin, this is where I set the fundamentals inside organization settings, the time zone, the roster cycle, and how shift swaps are governed. I work on a 4-week cycle, so I'm setting the start date to Monday, December 29th. Starting on a Monday just makes sense. It lines up with how most departments actually plan and repeat their patterns. Next up, shift swaps. Here, I get to choose how flexible swaps are, completely open, or reviewed before they go live. I'll go with approval required. And I'm giving approval rights to both roster builders and admins because flexibility is great, but oversight still matters. That way, swaps are easy, without becoming chaos. Perfect, Nina. The organization is now set. Now I need to define who our clinicians are and what they're qualified to do. I call these craft groups and scopes of practice. They come first because everything else depends on them. They tell me who someone is in the department and where it's safe for them to work. Before I write a single AI rule, I need this structure in place because my rules reference craft groups and scopes to match the right clinician to the right work. Once these are defined, I can start applying intelligence in a way that actually respects clinical reality. Under staff management, I'm opening craft groups and creating a new craft group called Emergency Physician. I'll set the color to red. This helps with quick visual recognition in the roster. For this group, I'm defining some default expectations. Because this craft group participates in night cover, I'll set a minimum number of consecutive night shifts. I'm also setting a weekend workload expectation. For example, 4 weekends over a 3-month period for a full-time equivalent. By defining these at the craft group level, I can allocate shifts more fairly and consistently, and I can also audit workload across the group over time. These settings act as a baseline. If needed, I can always override them for an individual clinician by adjusting their profile directly. I've created senior registrars, junior registrars, and house medical officers in the same way, each with their own departmental expectations for night shift requirements and weekend workload preferences. These settings are not fixed. They can be adapted for different departments, healthcare systems, and country-specific requirements. Next, let's create the scope of practices for this department. Under staff management, I'm opening scopes of practice and selecting add scope. For this emergency department, I'll keep it simple and create 2 scopes, adults and pediatrics. Scopes define what kind of clinical work a clinician can safely perform, and they're used when I match staff to vacancies. You can expand this as needed. For example, to include point-of-care ultrasound, toxicology, addiction medicine, geriatrics, and more, depending on your department structure. Now we need to add our doctors to the system. We can upload doctors individually or use the bulk import feature. Let's create a single doctor now and assign this doctor as an emergency physician. Each doctor gets assigned to one or more craft groups and scopes of practice. Notice how the system automatically creates user accounts and sends welcome emails. This is where our roster intelligence starts to understand which doctors can work which shifts. Now let me show you how bulk import works. This is especially useful when you need to onboard a large number of staff quickly. Here, I have 4 Excel files. The first one is a list of emergency physicians. I'll simply drag and drop them here, and the system will handle the rest. I repeat the same process for house medical officers, junior registrars, and senior registrars. Perfect! Our doctors are now in the system with their craft groups and scopes assigned. Now that we have craft groups, scopes, and staff set up, we can configure AI rules. These rules need to reference craft groups and staff, so they must come after. Let's set up AI rules next. Back on the dashboard, I'm clicking the tile Intelligent Rules. Here, you'll notice there are 2 layers of rules. The first layer is safety standard rules. I call these hard rules. These apply automatically to everyone across the organization. No exceptions, no overrides. They form the safety floor, the things that simply must not be broken. Every decision I make, every roster I generate, every suggestion I offer, all of it sits on top of these rules. Think of them as the guardrails. They don't make rostering exciting, but they make it safe. And once those are locked in, that's when things get interesting. Next are custom AI rules, sometimes called soft rules. This is where nuance comes in. For example, emergency physicians should have at least 12 hours rest between shifts. That's not a blanket law. It's a principle we want to respect whenever possible. These rules can be targeted to a specific craft group, a particular stream, or even an individual clinician. They let me refine behavior without ever breaking the fundamentals. Tell you one more thing. To make this practical, I come with a library of rule templates, drawn from EBAs and regulatory standards across Australian states, New Zealand, and other healthcare systems globally. You can apply a template as is, adapt it to your local context, and then activate it for your organization. It's not about reinventing the rules. It's about making them usable, visible, and consistently applied. Now comes the most important part, building the roster. I use a 5-level workflow that moves step by step from structure and demand all the way through to safe, workable shift assignments. Each level has a clear purpose. Together, they let me handle complexity without losing transparency or control. Let me walk you through it. Let's talk Level 1. Level 1 defines what shifts can exist within the service. This is where I set up clinical streams, such as the emergency department, and define the shift patterns for each stream, morning, evening, and night, with their exact start and finish times. By doing this first, every roster built later works from the same consistent framework. Nothing is assumed and nothing drifts over time. I've now set up 5 streams, 2 acute streams called Red Stream and Green Stream, a fast track stream, a short stay stream, and a night team. This closely reflects how most emergency departments operate at their core. Let's talk Level 2. Level 2 is demand planning. This is where demand gets defined. Here, I specify how many people are needed, on which shift, on which day. This creates the vacancies that will be filled later in the roster. You'll notice the streams and shift patterns from Level 1 are already here. I don't reinvent them. I build on them. Within each shift pattern, I describe what the service actually needs. So on a morning shift, that might be a certain number of emergency physicians, senior registrars, and house medical officers. In the afternoon, those numbers can change, because demand changes as the day goes on. By setting this up at the demand level, staffing requirements stay explicit, consistent, and easy to review before a single person is assigned. No guesswork. In the green stream, let's set the demand little differently. Sometimes you don't actually need a specific craft group. You just need the right level of seniority. This is where I use built-in OR logic. For this morning shift, the service needs 2 senior clinicians. They can be either senior registrars or emergency physicians, with emergency physicians preferred. That preference matters. It captures intent without turning flexibility into a problem. When I assign staff later, I'll always try to meet the preferred option first, and only fall back to the alternative when needed. It gives the department room to move, while still keeping expectations clear. Let me show you another quietly powerful thing you can ask me to do here. Imagine this emergency department runs senior registrar teaching on Wednesday mornings. During that time, you want your senior registrars at teaching, not covering the floor. Instead of reshaping the entire roster, I just adjust that one Wednesday morning shift. Here, I update the demand so senior registrars are released, and emergency physicians cover instead for that shift only. This is how departments actually work. Teaching happens, roles flex, demand changes, but not everywhere, all at once. In fixed grids or template-based systems, this kind of change is usually painful, or just avoided. With flexible demand at level 2, it's precise, intentional, and fully auditable. By doing this first, I know exactly what the service needs, before I assign a single person. That clarity makes everything downstream calmer and safer. You now set up demand for 1 week. From here, you can copy this demand forward in bulk. For example, into the next 13 weeks with a single action. I said 13 weeks because in most departments, a term usually runs for 12 to 13 weeks. Of course, you can copy more or fewer weeks depending on how your service plans. If there's a specific time where demand changes, a surge period, exam block, or service redesign, you can always adjust a single week or even a single day and increase or decrease the staffing required. This reflects how rostering works in the real world. It allows you to be explicit about what you need, when you need it, and how much you need across an entire term before anyone is assigned to shifts. That clarity is what lets everything downstream work safely and predictably. Let's talk level 3. Level 3 is the master roster. In many emergency departments, the master roster is used sparingly, and that's intentional. Most ED rostering needs flexibility, and I take care of that later using demand and availability. But for specific roles, leadership positions, education, and core departmental responsibilities, predictability matters. Those clinicians need protected, reliable time, and this is where that stability is created. You'll also see the master roster used more often in rural emergency departments, where consistent patterns are essential for safe service delivery. The master roster runs on a 4-week cycle, using the shift patterns we defined earlier. Some departments work on 2 or 8-week cycles, but 4 weeks gives enough flexibility without becoming hard to manage. And this is where the cycle start date from the beginning really matters. It anchors week 1, so these patterns always land on the right calendar dates every time they repeat. Not every clinician needs a master roster entry, and that's exactly the point. For people with variable hours, rotating streams, or more flexible work patterns, I rely on availability instead. When it's time to build the roster, I treat the master roster as a starting point, not a rulebook. Demand and safety always come first. Used well, it gives predictability where it's helpful, without locking the rest of the team into fixed patterns. That balance matters. Let's talk level 4. Level 4 is all about the clinician experience. This is where clinicians tell me what their availability looks like, simply, clearly, and on their terms. I'm logged in now as a clinician, looking at the non-admin view of the platform. From the dashboard, I open my availability. And from here, everything is about time. Not templates, not rules, just real life. This interface should feel instantly familiar. It works just like Apple Calendar or Google Calendar, so there's nothing new to learn. Clinicians don't pick shifts here, they just describe time. Preferred means, I'd like to work these hours. I'll prioritize these wherever possible, but I won't promise what the service can't deliver. Available means, I can work if needed. Undeclared means nothing is specified. In that case, I'll still work to meet contracted hours and keep things fair across the team. And unavailable means, don't schedule me. This is the one option that completely blocks assignments. Availability can repeat, daily, weekly, every 4 weeks. So it's easy to reflect real life without constantly re-entering the same information. As availability is added, I quietly analyze service demand and start guiding clinicians toward availability that's most likely to be used. I'm just reducing guesswork, lowering friction, and letting the system do the thinking in the background. Level 4 Admin View. This is Level 4 from the Admin View. By now, availability is collected across the whole workforce for the upcoming term. Green shows preferred, amber shows available, and red marks unavailable. In one glance, the admin has a true bird's eye view of the entire team's availability. No spreadsheets, no chasing. And this information feeds directly into level 5, where the roster is actually built. That's where the magic happens. Let's talk level 5. Before we move into level 5, let me quickly reset how I build a roster, because this part matters. I always work in layers. First comes the deterministic layer, the non-negotiables, availability and leave, right craft group, right scope of practice, no overlapping shifts, enough rest, no unsafe daily hours, no one working endlessly. That layer is strict. If something breaks a hard rule, it simply doesn't happen. Only after that do I optimize. That's where intelligence comes in, balancing fairness, nights, weekends, preferences, workload, and historical patterns. So when a roster appears, it's not random, and it's not rushed. Now that everything upstream is clear, this is where level 5 begins. Let's jump back into the living roster. This is level 5. This is where everything lives. What you're seeing here is the roster loaded in a stream view, with all the shifts cascaded exactly the way you set things up earlier in level 1 and level 2. Each stream, each shift pattern, laid out clearly. And yes, you can change to a time-based view. Or you can or even create your own custom view, so the roster works the way you work. Now let's go back to the stream view, because this is where the AI features come in. I'll start by selecting the red stream. First, I apply the master roster. That part's straightforward. Predictable commitments go in first. No surprises. Now you ask myself to generate the roster with Iris. At this point, I go through the full process we talked about earlier, applying all 7 assignment checks at once. Once the roster is generated, you can review everything before anything is locked in. What role they're covering, how they qualified for it, and how the decision was made. You can scroll through the entire list, in this case 153 assignments just for the red stream, and inspect as much or as little detail as you like. Happy with it? Then you apply it. And just like that, it drops into the grid. Now you can see the red stream clearly. Emergency physicians where you asked for them, registrars where they are, exactly matching the demand you set earlier. That's actually quite nice. From here, we repeat the same process for the remaining streams, quickly and consistently. And yes, while that's happening, you're allowed to grab a sip of coffee. In the background, the 2-week roster for the emergency department at Melbourne General Hospital is being built, using deterministic logic first, then AI optimization on top. Once all the streams are done, you can step back and look at the entire roster together. At this stage, I can already see one conflict and a few gaps. That's not a failure, that's visibility, and we'll deal with those next. If I switch to coverage view, you'll see the reality. A few vacancies are still unfilled. And that's exactly what I want to show you. There are 2 ways I build a roster. Generate with Iris is my careful mode. I apply all safety, fairness, and preference rules together to build a balanced roster. If there's no safe or fair option, I'll leave the shift unfilled. Fill gaps is my tactical mode. I still strictly respect craft groups and scopes of practice, and I never break hard safety rules. But I'm allowed to be more flexible with soft rules. For example, shortening a preferred 12-hour rest to 11 hours if the organisation's hard minimum is 10. I'll show the option, you decide. Hard rules stay unbroken. Soft rules can bend. That's the difference. Alright, now let me show you how fill gaps actually works. I'm looking at the full roster and the entire stream together. And straight away, a few things jump out. Here you can see we've over-rostered 1 registrar. 3 instead of 2. That's a problem. If I scan across to short stay, there are gaps. We needed an emergency physician there, and right now, no one's rostered. And on the night shift, we needed 3 HMOs, but we've only got 2. So, let's tackle this one thing at a time. First, I select short stay, and I ask myself to go into tactical mode and fill the gaps. Now I'm looking for staff who are qualified, available, and safe to use. You'll see I've found a few people who declared availability and match the craft group. Take Sam Jones down here. He's only rostered for 24 hours so far, but he can work up to 40. That puts him higher on the list and gives us a sensible option. Happy with that? I apply the assignments, and just like that, the gaps in short stay are fixed. Next up, nights. We still need one more HMO, so you select the night shift and run fill gaps again. Tactical mode finds another eligible person. Yes, they'll be a bit over-rostered, 58 hours instead of 40, but they've declared preferred availability. You apply it, and I accept that. And now the roster is almost complete. If I look at the grid, everything's green. Coverage looks good, except there's still that extra registrar over-rostered in Redstream. So let's deal with it properly. I go back into Shift View, into the red team, and here it is, 3 registrars instead of 2. You decide which one to remove. I unassign that person and they're gone. Clean, simple, no ripple effects. Now let's head back to Coverage View. And there we are, coverage is good. And that brings us to the end of this walkthrough. What you've seen here is intelligent roster, built carefully, designed for real clinical environments. Once the roster is built, there's always a final human check, because context matters. You publish when you're comfortable. From there, staff can view their shifts, sync them to Apple or Google Calendar, and get on with their work and their lives. There are many more nuances beyond this overview. Creating open shifts from unfilled gaps, managing the shift deck, AI-assisted, complex shift swaps. Those are advanced features, and they deserve their own dedicated demonstrations, which we'll share separately. For now, this was about showing what's possible when rostering combines augmented intelligence with human judgment, keeping safety, fairness, and clarity at the center. We're proud to be taking this forward globally, working with partners across different health systems, not limited to emergency departments, but anywhere healthcare rostering is complex and consequential. Intelligent Roster is built to scale, whether you're managing a few hundred clinicians or many thousands, without losing visibility or control. Start with a single department, expand to the whole hospital, or roll out across your entire health service. If this feels relevant to your context, you're welcome to visit our website and request a demo. We'll listen, understand your setting, and explore whether this could be useful for you. Let's connect. And we have so much more to show you around